Okay, let's unpack this deep dive into something that's shifted dramatically in the last few years. How to actually launch products today,
Okay.
especially in a world where, everyone's shouting for attention. That old playbook, the whole build it in silence, launch with a bang, and they will come. It feels, well, pretty outdated, doesn't it?
Completely. I mean, it's not just feeling outdated, it's often just ineffective now.
Hmm.
The digital space is so saturated.
Yeah.
Getting noticed, earning trust, even figuring out if you're building the right thing, it's tougher than ever.
And the insights we're digging into today, they come from Dr. Pooyan Ghamari. He is a Swiss economist, founder of the ALIN platform. And he really champions this different way of thinking, calls it content first.
That's the core idea, yeah. It's a pretty fundamental shift, moving away from treating content and community as like a marketing add-on after the product's basically done.
Okay, so the mission for us here is to really get to grips with why this content first thing is seen as the smart way to launch now, according to Dr. Gamari's work. And maybe more importantly, how do you actually do it? What are the steps?
Exactly. We're going to explore how leading with content isn't just, slick marketing. It's about building real trust, like from day one.
Right.
Validating your ideas before sinking tons of resources, sparking that organic growth, and ultimately creating a competitive edge that's actually hard for others to copy.
Okay, now that sounds interesting. So let's start right there, defining it. What does
Yeah.
content first really mean when you're building and launching something? It sounds simple, but feels like it turns the old way upside down.
It really does. So the way it's described here, content first means the whole product lifecycle, thinking it up, checking if people want it, actually building it, launching, changing it over time, all that happens through this constant open conversation with your
A
audience.
conversation?
Yeah. The story, the narrative you share about why you're building it, how you're doing it, and the stories your audience shares back, that's the engine driving everything, not just an afterthought.
Huh. So instead of polishing a product in secret and then figuring out the story to sell it,
Exactly. You're building the story and the community while you build the product. It's interconnected.
you're ditching that whole stealth mode approach
Uh-huh.
where you just suddenly appear after months or years with a finished thing and just kind of hope for the best.
Pretty much. In today's world, people are, naturally skeptical. They want context. They want connection. Authenticity matters a lot more.
Right, because attention is the really scarce thing now, maybe more than just good ideas. So content isn't just the flyers you print before opening day.
No, not at all. It's framed here as the essential bridge. It connects the idea to becoming a real movement. It turns the splashy event of a launch into actual sustained momentum,
And it changes users into...
into champions,
Yeah.
real advocates for what you're doing because they've been part of it somehow.
Okay, I think I'm getting the big picture. But let's dig into why it works so well. The source highlights a few key advantages. The first one seems huge, building in public.
Oh, this is a game changer. When you decide to share the journey, warts and all, not just the shiny end result, you start building emotional investment and credibility right away. You're basically inviting people behind the scenes.
Showing the effort, the thinking, the hiccups.
Exactly that. People see the humans involved, they get the process, they see the challenges you're tackling, and, crucially, the purpose behind it all.
And that changes the whole relationship before you even ask them for money or an email address.
It totally reframes it. Your audience stops being just a demographic you target. They actually become part of the product's story, its DNA. Even before it launches, they feel seen, heard, invested.
Yeah, that makes sense for building trust up front. Now, what about the practical, maybe the economic side? The source mentions the economics of community-led launches.
This is where the efficiency argument comes in. Think about products built in isolation. Often, they burn through time and cash, only to find out they slightly missed the mark, or they really struggle to get organic traction.
Because they didn't build that early connection.
Precisely. A content-first approach, by its nature, creates these continuous feedback loops right from the start.
Ah, so you're constantly checking in.
Exactly. And that dramatically de-risks your decisions. You're course correcting based on actual user input all the time. Plus, that transparency, that process, it naturally sparks word of mouth. People are already talking about it because they're involved.
So those early folks, the ones in the community, they're more than just beta testers then. They're like mini marketers.
Totally. They become evangelists. And the content itself does more than attract users. It pulls in experts, potential partners, people who resonate with your mission. Every story, every poll, every early testimonial, it all becomes this asset that expands your reach without a huge ad spend.
It sounds like it generates its own energy, builds momentum.
That's a great way to think about it. And the source really stresses that this isn't just a launch campaign, like a one-time push. It's an ongoing adaptive system. The story isn't fixed. It's alive. It gets updated constantly by customer comments, by user-generated stuff, by your own updates.
And those updates, they do double duty, right?
They absolutely do.
Yeah.
Every blog post, every video clip, every reply in a forum, it's a touch point with your audience, keeping them engaged, and it's a test bed for improving the product. You're getting real-time reactions.
And the result of keeping that cycle going.
You get rapid product evolution because you're iterating based on live, authentic feedback.
Yeah.
And maybe the biggest thing, you build a defensible moat, not just based on features, which can be copied, but on that deep sense of belonging and community you've nurtured. That's much harder for a competitor to replicate.
Okay, the why is definitely compelling, but let's get practical. How do you actually do this? The source lays out what's basically a 5-step action plan. Let's walk through it. Step 1. Validating market need through dialogue.
Yeah, this is non-negotiable, basically.
Yeah.
You have to talk directly with potential users right from the very, very beginning. It's just the most efficient way to find out what real problems people have, see if there's actual demand, and avoid, building something nobody actually wants.
So how do you recommend doing that? What does that dialogue look like? What kind of content?
It starts with going where your audience hangs out. Social media, maybe specific forums, newsletters if you have one. Use polls. Ask about their pain points, their current workarounds, what's missing from what they use now.
Open-ended questions too.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Open-ended Q&A sessions are great. You want to really understand their why and pay super close attention to things people mention again and again, their recurring frustrations or wishes.
And you're not just looking for praise, I assume.
Oh, absolutely not. The source is really clear on this. Don't shy away from criticism. Honestly, negative feedback, even though it stings sometimes, it's often the clearest signal about where you're off base or where the real unmet need is. It's like a guide. There's this A-Land example in the text that fits perfectly. They used real-time polls about potential investment features. And what came back wasn't just, we like feature X. It was underlying anxieties investors had.
Really?
Yeah. And that feedback didn't just shape the feature itself. It influenced their compliance stuff, how they onboarded people, even their customer support strategy. That's the depth you get from talking early and openly.
Wow, okay. Shaping the whole business, not just the product feature. That's powerful. Okay, step 2 in the plan. Sharing your product development journey while it's happening.
Right. This does two things at once. One, it's a transparency pledge. It shows you're building with your audience, not just for them. And two, it acts as this ongoing low-cost marketing engine.
By showing the messy parts, the process.
Exactly. Showing the challenges, the breakthroughs, the moments you had to pivot, the things you learned along the way. It pulls people into the narrative. It makes the brand feel human and the product relatable, not just some abstract thing.
So how often and what format? Weekly blog posts? Videos?
The suggestion is pretty regular updates, maybe weekly, maybe bi-weekly. Share what you're working on, the specific problems you tackled that week, any unexpected roadblocks, what you figured out. Use formats that work for your audience: blogs, short videos, quick audio notes, maybe even live streams.
And involve the team.
Yeah, feature different team members. Explain the why behind key decisions. Be honest about mistakes and how you're fixing them. And critically, always ask for feedback at each stage. What do you think of this direction? That sort of thing.
Builds credibility and makes the brand feel tangible.
Totally. It builds authenticity. People connect with real stories, real people. And, side benefit, it often attracts talent and partners who like that transparent, mission-driven vibe.
Okay, so validate needs, build in public. Then step 3 is releasing your MVP, or minimum viable product, but doing it with a story-driven launch.
This is the transition point, right?
Yeah.
You go from showing the build to actually offering something people can use, but you don't just, flick a switch.
Yeah.
You frame that MVP release as a really important shared moment in the story you've all been part of.
So the launch is part of the ongoing story.
Exactly. It's about answering those key questions for your early believers. Why this product right now? And why should you trust us to build it? You weave together the narrative, the problem, the backstory, those aha moments, the big vision.
And who gets access first? Not everyone.
The advice is clear. Start with your most engaged early community members, the ones who've been giving feedback all along. Reward their participation with first dibs. Give them recognition, maybe even some influence on what comes next. They've earned it.
How do you make that launch feel like you're still doing it together?
Use things like direct video messages from the founders. Maybe a personal letter explaining the emotion of reaching this stage. Showcase some early testimonials if you have them. And importantly, frame the MVP not as done, but as the start of the next phase where their feedback is crucial. Invite bug reports, suggestions, even early case studies. That A-Land example fits here too. They launched their dashboard with founder videos, and they had this live first 100 users community wall showing feedback as it came in. Really emphasized the co-creation part.
That leads perfectly into step 4, actively collecting testimonials and user-generated content, UGC.
Yeah, this is where the community's voice becomes incredibly powerful. Nothing sells your product or builds trust better than authentic words from actual users.
It's like social proof, but amplified.
Exactly. Genuine testimonials, reviews, people sharing stories about how your product actually helped them, that becomes your best marketing material, hands down. It acts as these viral proof points that just resonate way more than official marketing speak.
But how do you get people to actually create this stuff? It doesn't always just happen, right?
You got to be proactive. Ask for reviews or feedback after they hit a certain milestone or seem to have had a success. And don't just ask for a star rating. Ask for the story. Why did you choose us? What specific problem did it solve? What could be better?
Incentives help.
Yeah, strategically, incentivize it. Give public shout-outs, maybe offer early access to new features, give out some swag, or create a special insider status. Then take the best UGC you get and share it everywhere. Website, social, onboarding, presentations. The key insight here, really, is when users see their own experiences, their own words reflected back by the brand, they feel this stronger connection. They become advocates, and they stick around longer.
Okay, validated. Built in public, story-driven launch, collected user voices. Step 5, the final one, sounds like where the engine really keeps running long-term, iterating based on these content-driven feedback cycles.
This is what makes it sustainable. The source really hammers this home. Continuous improvement is key. And that constant stream of content, the interactions, the poll results, the comment threads, seeing how people use the product after seeing certain content, it all feeds this real-time feedback loop. It lets you adapt constantly.
So it's not just collecting feedback randomly, it's building it into the rhythm of development.
Exactly. After you push an update or run a campaign, you actively go back to the community. Ask specific things. What worked here? What's still missing? Based on this, what's next on your wish list? You look at what content sparked the most useful discussions or revealed the biggest needs.
And crucially, showing them that you heard them.
Yes. Be transparent with your roadmap. Point directly to how community input led to specific changes or new features. Celebrate the improvements that came straight from user suggestions.
That improves the product and strengthens the community bond at the same time.
It creates this amazing virtuous circle. Better feedback leads to a better product, which builds more loyalty, which leads to even richer feedback and insights, which fuels more advocacy. It just keeps reinforcing itself.
That cycle does sound incredibly hard for a competitor to just jump into.
Let's talk about that bigger picture.
Right.
How does this whole content-first thing build a competitive moat, something most traditional companies might miss?
Well, because you're building relationships and dialogue, not just shipping features, you end up creating these structural advantages, things that are really hard for someone else to just copy or build faster.
What kinds of advantages are we talking about?
Well, think about network effects, for starters. Every piece of content, every conversation, every user story, you amplify it, adds another connection point to this growing web around your product and your mission. It expands your reach organically, it attracts talent, it surfaces opportunities you just wouldn't see otherwise.
And that constant stream of feedback. It's more than just data points, it's fuel. That ongoing conversation reveals subtle needs, unexpected ways people are using your product. You learn how to really serve and delight your audience in ways competitors just won't get because they aren't having those same conversations.
It feels like it builds a different kind of authority, too. Not just market share, but trust.
It absolutely does. A brand that consistently shows up as open, responsive, and genuinely part of the conversation builds this deep level of trust and authority. It's incredibly difficult for competitors to dislodge that, even if they release something with similar features. Features are easy to copy. That relationship isn't.
And what about when things inevitably go sideways? Bugs happen, launches get delayed.
That's another huge advantage. When you've built in public, when you've shared the journey, you earn a lot more patience and forgiveness from your audience. They get your intentions, they've seen the challenges. So if there's a bug, they're much more likely to see it as like, okay, a bump in our road, rather than, ugh, that company messed up again.
That resilience seems invaluable. Okay, this brings up some practical questions people might have. For instance, how exactly does this content-first model really reduce the risk of a product launch bombing?
Fundamentally, it grounds your big decisions in actual user feedback right from the start. You're not guessing about demand or potential problems. You're uncovering them, testing assumptions with the market as you go, not just hoping you nailed it when you finally launch. That community input is constant validation.
What about choosing content formats? If you're doing all this sharing, how do you know where to focus your energy? Video, blog, podcast?
The advice seems pretty pragmatic. Start where your audience already is. If they're mostly on LinkedIn, focus there. If they love YouTube tutorials, lean into video. Test different formats early on, see what resonates, and then double down on what actually gets engagement and sparks useful conversations with your specific community.
Encouraging that user-generated content, the UGC, seems vital. Any quick tips on really getting that flywheel spinning?
Definitely. Recognize and reward contributors. Simple shoutouts, early access, maybe some special community status. These things go a long way. Make it super easy for people to share their stories or feedback. And then amplify the heck out of the good stuff you get. Showcase your users being successful.
How do you avoid burning out your team or just overwhelming the audience? Content fatigue is a real thing.
Yeah, the key seems to be quality and authenticity over just raw volume. Don't just post to post. Share updates or insights that are genuinely meaningful, either to the product's progress or to the audience's interests. Find a sustainable rhythm for your team. And ask your audience what they actually find valuable. It's about impact, not just output. And that connects back to transparency, which the source really emphasizes. Being radically transparent. Showing the real journey, the good, the bad, the learning. It fosters this deep emotional buy-in and trust. It makes users feel like insiders, like partners.
We've talked a lot about stories and dialogue. What about hard data? How do you balance that narrative approach with, metrics and numbers?
The recommendation is really to blend them. Storytelling hooks people, makes it relatable. Data validates it, builds credibility. So, use case studies with real results. Weave in testimonials. Be transparent with reporting key metrics, progress, even challenges. Use actual numbers where it makes sense to back up the story.
When's the right time to actually release the MVP in this model? It feels like it might be earlier than usual.
Definitely feels earlier. The guidance suggests releasing as soon as it solves a core pain point well enough for people to actually use it and give meaningful feedback. The trick is using your content to frame it correctly, not as finished, but as this exciting next step where the community's input is absolutely vital for what comes next.
And handling negative feedback, especially when you're building so publicly.
Treat it like gold, basically. Address concerns openly, honestly, right there in the community. Show people how you're taking their feedback and making changes. Thank the critics specifically for helping you improve. That kind of response can turn skeptics into your biggest fans. It builds massive trust. And thinking about measuring success here, what key performance indicators, what KPIs should teams be tracking is probably not just sales figures, right?
Right. The source points to things like engagement rates on your content, likes, comments, shares, the volume, but also the quality of the feedback you're getting. Are people giving thoughtful input? Track conversions or signups that you can directly attribute to content. Count the number and quality of testimonials. Look at user retention. Try to connect the dots between content engagement and how people are actually using the product.
Okay, last big question. How do you scale this? If the company grows beyond just a few people, how do you keep this content-first, community-centric approach going? It seems like you need to bake it into your culture and processes early. Document how you communicate openly, how you engage the community. Train new hires on this philosophy. Invest in tools, community platforms, feedback systems that can handle more volume. And critically, keep those content and feedback loops tightly integrated with product development, not siloed off somewhere. It has to remain core to how the company operates, not just a launch tactic.
Okay, let's try and pull this all together then. What's the absolute core takeaway from this deep dive into Dr. Ghamari's content-first approach?
I think the fundamental shift is seeing content not just as marketing material you create late in the game, it's the actual foundation. It's how you discover what the market needs, how you evolve the product with real user input, and how you build growth that lasts, that's defensible in this really noisy digital world.
So content-first launches, they're less about that short-term hype and much more about building genuine, lasting trust, about getting your audience involved throughout the whole ride, and about constantly learning and adapting based on what they tell you.
Yeah. If you want to thrive today, where trust and authenticity are paramount, it really suggests you need to start with the story you're willing to tell openly. Start with the conversations you're willing to have. Commit to that transparency. The product grows out of that dialogue, and the community grows with it because they feel like they're part of building something meaningful.
Makes you think. If the future really does belong to these content-first builders, what story will you, listening right now, start telling next? Or maybe, what story will you choose to participate in?